Yeah, there's another. Oh, you're pressing record. Okay, cool.
Was that a was it a million ARR or ACV, or was it
No,
a
it was
million in
personal
terms of,
earnings.
personal earnings? Yes, of course. Sorry, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
People are starting to come in now. Excellent.
And I got some guys like, oh, I'm at 9. Is that close enough? Will you let me in? 900K.
Yeah, go out, go
One
out, go.
guy, one guy left a company mid-year and went to another company. So he sent me 2 W-2s, and he's like, between the two companies, I did it. Is that okay? So it was interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess it's all right if he does it across two companies. That shows he's very good.
Oh my
Or
gosh, yeah.
she's
Well,
very good.
he the second company was one that he was going back to after a year or two. So it wasn't like he was a newbie. He was going back into a motion he knew.
Yeah,
But still, yeah. I mean, just making a shift from one to the other and still making it that year. That's impressive.
yeah. That's very impressive. Yeah, I mean, because you could have a lot of outliers, right? You could close a mega deal that you've been working on for 5 years. You could it could be something around compliance that this year is the last year that you've got to do it, and so it just pulls everyone over the line. But if you've done it in two different companies, that is very impressive.
All right, Adam and Jamal, I'm going to go on mute now that we have some attendees filling up the seats, and I'll let you guys take it over.
Thanks, John.
Have fun, everybody.
Right on.
Awesome. Well, hey everyone. Thank you for joining Jamal and I. Really happy to have you here. Hopefully, the next hour is going to be useful, full of tips, and sets you up well. We're designing this so there's going to be 20 to 25 minutes at the end, so you can ask questions. We really want that to be interactive. We want to add as much value to you and your specific kind of situation as possible. So get your questions ready. For that, you'll see at the bottom of the screen here, there's a Q&A feature. So that's where you'll ask your questions. Hold fire for now. We'll let you know when we're ready to take those questions. But that's exactly where you'll put those questions. So let's kick it off. Jamal, why don't you introduce yourself for those people that don't know who you are? Why don't you explain that?
Sure. I'm a professional LinkedIn poster. I just do posts on LinkedIn every day. That's pretty much my full-time job. But before I did that as a full-time job, I was an IC for 20 years, 13 of which were at Oracle, and the rest of them were at a lot smaller SaaS companies. And in the 20 years, in the second half of those 20 years, I learned how to do really large deals, and then that became my thing, and I was hooked. And after I left working for anybody else, now I have a practice of helping individuals and teams learn how to chase really big deals.
Awesome. And do you want to just touch briefly on the community you're building? Because that's also super interesting.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as a matter of fact, shout out to Claudio. Claudio Sartori is on this call right now. He's in Brazil, and he's one of my peeps. He's in the community. So you can check it out at enterprisesellers.com, and it's basically a community of practice for kind of dyed in the wool enterprise sellers, right? Sellers, individual contributors, and sales leaders who sell to large enterprises and want to be around others and help each other hone our craft.
Fantastic. Well, it's great to be doing this with you, Jamal. So I'm Adam. I'm the co-founder and CEO at DealPad. I'm a 3-time chief revenue officer. I've helped 3 companies grow from about 50 million to just under 100 million ARR, and I'm a 3-time software founder. So DealPad is my 3rd organization that I've built. I've also had a stint at Intuit and at Salesforce as VP of sales. So my background is software sales, selling enterprise, probably not as big as Jamal, but certainly, definitely closing $1 million plus deals. And DealPad is built from the ground up for mid-market and enterprise sellers to build a process with their buyers and align through that process together. So if you're interested in finding out more about DealPad, it's dealpad.io. All right, let's kick this off. I guess, Jamal, we're talking today specifically about enterprise. We're talking about the complexities of what has always been a complex sales process that's increasingly becoming more complex, more difficult to navigate through. I'm personally seeing and hearing a lot of deals are stalling because of indecision, and that's linked a lot of the time to a lack of access to C-suite. It's linked to the CFO becoming much more involved than they were even a couple of years ago. The CFO now almost becomes one of the key deciders as to whether or not they're going to write that check or not, and it's very difficult to access the CFO. And I think what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing is that it's forcing AEs where they were able to shepherd the deal through, maybe just using their champion and their coach. They're now being left out of a lot of the conversations that are going on their buyer's side, and they're not able to influence as well. And it forces them to spend a lot of time with one or two people in that buying committee that aren't really kind of selling through well enough for them. So I guess, have you heard this? And, in your experience, when you think about, one of the key elements of getting access to the buying team, what do you do? What's your kind of framework and playbook for that?
So yes, it's a problem. Getting higher in accounts, particularly the finance organization. They've just gobbled up all the decision-making authority. With the VC and private equity back, that's coming directly from the investors and from senior management at the large portfolio companies. They're just saying, we're going to stop buying and we're going to fire people until we get back to profitability or whatever number shows that we're in good health. And that's just what companies do. So I've noticed that just like a constant refrain that everybody in the SaaS world has, since the downturn really started around the beginning of the year and before, was, holy cow, we've got to sell to the enterprise. We've been selling to each other, series A, B, and C companies. We've been selling to each other for the last few years during the big run up in valuations and unicorn status companies, et cetera. And now the bubble has burst. We're not really selling, we're not buying from each other anymore. We're trying to sell to each other, and that's not working. We got to sell to the bigger enterprises, big companies that actually have revenues that are not going to be so impacted by the deflation of the current tech bubble, or what was the current tech bubble. So over and over and over again, I'm hearing sales teams, management teams, investors, boards focused on how do we get to more senior stakeholders in larger accounts. So that's kind of addressing your first question. The second question is, how do you do that? How do you get higher in these accounts? How do you access the now elevated level of buying the decision makers? And it's easy. You just call them up. We're all just calling them up. You know what I mean? There is such a flood of outbound. So there's this confluence, on the one hand, the finance and management has taken over almost all buying decisions. And there's this whole world of sales tech, a lot of which has to do with top of the funnel activities, primarily email sequences. And so there's just this way over indexing on top of the funnel email and phone based outreach that is just crushing buyers. So that doesn't work. I mean, I talked with a CIO who said I get about 400 unsolicited sales emails per week.
Yeah.
So clearly just throwing in, just think of it, if you're a seller and you spend a good hour or 3 hours or whatever it is researching and doing all this stuff to craft the perfect email, if your target is getting 400, 500, 600 emails a week, what are the chances they're even going to see the email?
Yeah.
Because it's on page 3 of their inbox.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's a couple directions that we could take this. One is the initial approach. How do you contact, cold or warm? How do you contact executives? But the other is, how do you engage them in a business conversation? So you tell me, where do you want to go with the conversation?
Yeah, well, I think the first part, I think that it's a challenge because we're SDRs and sales development teams have become so accustomed to using email and sequencing, and it isn't working. And you're absolutely right, and it has caused this massive void where emails are going to spam. There's so much noise. It's very difficult to cut through. I actually think that picking the phone up these days is a bit novel. That could be a going back to picking the phone up. Not many SDRs are doing that, but I think that the real crux of where I'm hearing most people fall down is, we've got a buying committee of 12 people. We know 2 of them, and we know we need to probably see another 5 or 6, and then how do we influence the other 5 or 6 that we don't see? And email isn't working to engage them. How do we rally that committee and get in front of them? Because I think if you went, but when I was an IC, and I'm going back 10 years, I could send an email, or I could pick the phone up and I could reach the people that I wanted to, and that those days have long gone. And if you don't do that, you're not going to close the deal. You're going to be spending a lot of time talking to 2 or 3 people that you can access, and then rely on those people to sell through their organization. And I've experienced it personally, and I've heard it a lot, that just isn't cutting it at the moment, and it's hard to cut through all the noise.
Well, I think with whatever repeatable, systematic outbound motion, there's going to come volume, and volume assumes that winning the outbound game is a numbers game. Now, this kind of ties into the whole buying committee and then multi-threading. I think that it makes a heck of a lot of sense to slow down to speed up. And instead of using this programmatic approach of trying to just spam the world and see what sticks, rather to slow down, maybe not send that email. I mean, let me say this, though. There is one email that'll work. And that is an email that references a person or a project that executive knows or is in charge of. And so I will put, either their colleague or the direct report or something like in the subject line, regarding conversation with Joe Schmo, or, something like that. And then the body of the email is, hey, Adam, I've been talking with your team, this person, about Project Mustang. And we believe that there's something that we can add to it, like we did at Shell Oil or Walmart or Sainsbury's. Love to get just 10 minutes to let you know what that looks like. Let's set up a call when it makes sense for you. Super short, but referencing things that matter to them, people and things that matter to them. So that's the one email that I think that will get through, because it connotes that you are on the inside.
Yeah. How do you get? I agree. A really powerful way of doing it is getting your buyer to do that heavy lifting for you, because ultimately, if somebody on your buying team with some authority asks someone in their organization to help them, they're much more likely to do it than if you or I reached out and asked them. How, in your experience, how do you become successful at doing that?
Igniting a champion on the inside of the account. Is that?
Well, yes, but more than that, it's because your champion probably hasn't got unless they are in the kind of an exec role. They probably haven't got the gravitas to get around and get the CFO at the table, or get, but how do you kind of rally the people in your buying committee to bring the right people in at the right time? What have you seen?
Well, I actually start at the top and work my way down very quickly. So, I use the analogy of a mountain a lot. And in the analogy is of a mountain as applied to your account. And at the summit of the mountain are the execs, and the worker bees, individual contributors are at the bottom, and the mid-level managers are in the middle. And I've always found that it is much more efficient and impactful, instead of seeing yourself as a mountain climber climbing up the mountain, it's better to become a heliskier and to be kind of plopped down from the top. And top down is bigger deals happen faster. And so I will slow down enough to find a way to get to a very senior person. And basically the message is, look, this is probably something for somebody on one of your teams, but I want to see if it's an issue that you care about. Here's the issue. Here's the value prop. Here's how it's looked for other customers. Do you care about this issue? Yes or no? If you do, who do you want me to talk to? And then you just get pushed down. And then once you get pushed down from somebody super senior, that activation is kind of there. That's the motivator. If they're serious, they'll introduce you to the right people who are on the buying committee.
Yeah.
So there are plenty of ways to do it, but that's my favorite one, is because when it comes from, the boss's boss's boss to work with Jamal and his team, that's very different than, oh, the sales guy is calling me and I don't know him from Adam. And, I don't want to stick my neck out because I don't know how good his stuff is.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We do have a question. I'm going to take it because it's relevant to what we're talking about. So Matt Lozada has asked, how do you de-risk deals when there's a champion in the executive leadership in the middle of the deal?
De-risk deals when there are changes in the executive leadership in Matt, that's a great. Matt's also in my community. Matt, that is such, it happens so often out of left field. And we think we've got all our bases covered. And then all of a sudden the carpet is pulled out from under us and there's somebody new or different. So let me look at the rest of the question. Also, how do you think about keeping logos leading up to renewal when your champion no longer has the same okay, let's get to that one next. So I don't have a great answer for how do you recover once the change in leadership happens. What I do have is the preventative medicine, which is, plan in advance that you could lose any one of your champions. So you need more than one. It's like redundancy in an IT system. You never want to have one server. You want at least two, right? And then you load balance across them or whatever, however the analogy would go. So hard to recover once you lose somebody and don't have anybody else. Much better to plan in advance and build redundancy into your relationships.
Yeah.
Second component.
I've experienced that as well. I think that don't just have one exec leader in that team, because ultimately that will curveball the deal if that person then decides to leave. Typically they're fought to win the budget or to be able to roll this project out, and that budget will sit with them. So if they leave, anybody coming in is likely to review that. Whereas if you've got one or two people on the exec team that are driving this, and it mitigates the reliance on one person. So I would always try and find. So I think that's why the CFO is such a key role in these days. That if you've got somebody on the exec team plus the CFO, you've almost got it covered if there's a change in leadership, because the CFO will typically can continue that, or the exec sponsor who owns the project will most likely champion through to the CEO to say, look, we need to get this done.
Just to finish up on Matt's second part question, how do you think about keeping logos leading up to a renewal when your champion no longer has the same impact they once had after a reorg? This is a requalification, both of your champion as well as the people around them. And I'm a real deadpan qualifier. So if I was going to go to somebody else on the buying committee or influential on the decision, I would just kind of do a temperature check. Hey, Sue, it's been a while since we talked about this. Here's the stats on how it's gone with our product so far, but just, bare bones. If you had a gut, I always use the scale of 1 to 10 question. It's a lovely way to get a back of the envelope quantitative answer out of somebody. I'll say scale of 1 to 10. How interested are you? If we're going around for votes on who wants to renew, scale of 1 to 10, what's your level of interest in renewing? And based on the number that they come back with, if they're cold, warm, or hot. And so there's a requalification of all the folks that need to happen when your champion no longer has the juice that they used to. That's the short answer.
Yeah, I just to add to that, I think you shouldn't have to rely on your champion on renewal. I think if you've got to rely on your champion on renewal, then there's something wrong. Typically, where I find you need to rely on your champion is if you haven't integrated or implemented 100% throughout that first year, and there's still some work to be done. If you've got the product set up working and you've added some value, then you should have some key champions across that team that wouldn't want this turned off.
There's been a bunch of other questions. You want to hit those, or you want to do something?
Yeah, let's carry on with our track. We'll get to these questions. Yeah. But I think the whole stakeholder thing, it is a really important one. I say no, but then Michael Underwood's added here, he's found using the board or other exec leaders in the company to get to senior decision makers is a good strategy. And I totally agree with that. I think leveraging your board and the relationships that your board have to open up C-suite conversations at your prospect is a really good strategy. It gets you introductions every single time.
100%. They are already above the tree line, right? They're above the clouds at the top of the mountain anyway. Their networks are filled with other people at that level. So those are the folks that you want to. I'd rather go to my board than LinkedIn, just looking for relationships.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, for sure. And the board are going to help, right? They're literally invested in making sure that you succeed and you grow. They're going to make the right introductions. I think you need to be very thoughtful about the type of introduction you want and what you want from that introduction. You need to really think it out. You need to plan it and be very methodical about the ask that you're making. But if you make it right, you'll get a good introduction pretty much all the time. So we've kind of talked about the buying committee, and I guess you're not going to close any deal, particularly a large deal, unless you can build a value story. And typically you're going to want to build that story multiple times for that organization, for different people. The way that the CFO is going to want to look at value is going to be different to how the CEO might, or the CIO might, or the user team. So, Jamal, in your experience, because I think this is one of the most important elements that swings the deal on either way. How do you think about crafting that story across an organization for multiple stakeholders?
I mean, it's an absolutely great question. I think we're really seeing the rise and the recognition of a certain role, the value engineering role. And in one way, it gets quite complex. In another way, it gets quite simple. And what I mean by that is, I was on a call yesterday with a Fortune 50 company, and they would like to get into the mega deal game. And their solution is just, it's very complex, and it reaches a whole bunch of business units within large organizations, and it influences many people. So it's big time software. And understanding the value that can be derived from any improvement, be it technical or human or process, takes an awful lot of measurement. It could be interviews, it could be looking at audit logs, it could be all kinds of things. And to really gather all of that data and track it, make sense of it, that can be a really complex process. But when it's all rolled up, at the end of the day, it's going to be, did it save money? Did it make money? Did it make it more safe? Did it make the user experience more sticky? Did it make us more compliant? That's kind of it. Mm-hmm. So reps can do a certain amount on their own when it comes to both finding this information and rolling it up into a story. But professionals who are great spreadsheet jockeys and all that other kind of stuff can do a ton of fine-tooth comb analysis that can bring 2 or 3 more levels of credibility to when you do that roll up of, we can cut so many heads, or, we're going to save so much time or make so much money or save so much money. So the process of doing that is super, super important today. Another thing that I'm seeing, not at the mid-tier or commercial buyers, but at the enterprise buyers, they're starting to come to their bigger vendors and say, Adam, we're kind of coming out of the other end of this, and we do need to spend some money in 24. We're going to have 2 significant projects, and they are 7-8 figure budgets for the projects. So just stand by. This is going to happen. It's going to be a lot more painful to go through in an analysis, but somebody's going to win and somebody's going to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
So,
I think often, Jamal, particularly in much larger enterprises, the teams don't actually know what the project's going to look like for them. They want somebody to help them craft it and show them the path to get into exit, not just executing it, but to setting it up and getting it running. They've got gaps, and I've always found that if you can lean in and really help that team, that wider team, understand, what's their role in this? What are they looking to get out of this? What are the outcomes they're shooting for? And if you think about, what I used to do is I used to just map it out on a whiteboard and have layers, and each layer was essentially a kind of a hierarchy, and each hierarchy would have their outcomes that they were looking to get from this. And obviously, the higher up you went, the more strategic it became. And every lane, you would have a gap where they wouldn't understand how to do something. And if you can figure out what the gaps are for them, that's your value story, right? And then you craft a way of showing them how to get themselves to completion of this project. If you can then show them that you know how to do that, you're very likely to become a trusted advisor and win that deal.
For sure. Which puts the onus on the vendor, and typically we're tech vendors, right? Most of us are not professional services vendors, but
Yep.
The onus is on the vendor to provide those insights, not just the tech, but the insights either on how to use it or why this approach is better than the way that it's done, et cetera. And another thing that's coming up more often now is change management. I'm
Yep.
hearing more tech vendors start to have in their own toolkit the ability to walk customers through change management, which is another big piece of any project. Okay, if we slap this in as a new process, do our SOPs change? Do our reporting lines change? The actual process change? Do the roles change? All that stuff is going from the old way to the new way, and that's not been something that software companies have done a lot of, but I'm hearing of it more and more.
Yeah, agreed. I think one of the challenges a lot of customers have, particularly our customers. So, our customers are kind of mid-market. They're definitely not enterprise. We don't sell into enterprise. We work with companies that sell into enterprise. So our typical customer doesn't have the scale of resource that they might need to deploy into a proper enterprise sales motion. And so if you had a blank canvas and you had to create 3 or 4 roles to help your team in a 10 million ARR SaaS company sell enterprise well, what would those roles be?
Some roles are already in place and some are not so much. The ones that are in place are, you need an executive seller. Could be the CEO, could be the head of strategy, the head of product, something like that, whose name and background and passion is all wrapped up in the value of the product. And they can be kind of the visionary person who is very credible and believable about which way to go. And that alone instills a lot of confidence. Then there's the value engineering role, which I just love, which is the ability to quantify value, either in the product or the outcome. It can help the internal team with pricing, all kind of good stuff. Then there is this, I guess it could be kind of a candidate could be the executive that I mentioned, or it could be somebody else, which is the real SME. And I'll tell a quick story to make a point. I was talking with an old buddy at Oracle a few months ago, and he's like, I'm like, how's it going? He's like, we've done something pretty revolutionary, at least for our line of business. Instead of, I have a new role, and now I have a team. And instead of being kind of a pre-sales team, I went out and got the okay to spend a lot of money on industry people, right? Like who had written blogs and who speak at conferences and all that other kind of good stuff, who also know tech. And they come in and they can talk and I come from the pharma, R&D pharma tech space. And so he was hiring guys who were from the R&D world, and they could come in with customers and just start talking about really bleeding edge stuff, best practices and very deep processes that are in the guts of every R&D organization, et cetera. Quickly identify kind of a wish list of what that big customer would want to have different in their own world, come back into our own shop and mock up something with no code, low code extensions against our own products, and come back in a week or two with something that looks absolutely amazing. And that whole back end is our COTS products. And the investment that we made in these expensive, 200, 300, 400K a year kind of people are yielding millions in new revenue a year later. So there's a lot of talk now about having a leaner, badder sales team. There's talk about getting rid of SDRs or BDRs and having more, I don't know, seasoned or whatever capable means sellers. But a role like this covers an awful lot of ground very quickly, just given the credibility from what they do, what they've done in their day-to-day life. So those are three roles right off the top that I would say.
Yeah. One role that I introduced in my last company, and it made a massive difference to the team, was a pursuit advisor. So we hired what we called a pursuit advisor, which was essentially a somebody that would support on all the research, all of the collateral, all of the gathering of materials that we would need in order to go through a process with multiple buyers. And as they asked for something, whether it was data or it was some analysis of something or a case study, they would be there. They would be the person that we would go to. And they were such a key cog in the wheel for us. They worked really closely with value engineering, with solutions architects, and it was it became a kind of a really important role in our ability to be able to deliver the right materials that our buyers needed.
It sounds like a business analyst. So that like a deal business analyst.
Yeah, kind of. They wore a few hats, but they would definitely pull together all the data and kind of crunch a lot. Crunch a lot of the figures that we'd need, build out ROI calculators and all that type of thing. But it was a key role for us, and they were customer facing, so they were very good communicators, very good in front of the customer.
Did you also have value engineering as well, or because what you just described sounded like value engineering?
Yeah, no, we did. It was a different role. So the value engineers sat with our customers, and they spent a lot of time on site. That was their role. We purposely wanted them to be on site. In a lot of our customers, a lot of our prospects, we asked for a seat at the table. So they gave us a desk, and our value engineers would be one day a week in there for 3 or 4 months, as we were and could really then have an ear to the ground and hear what was going on, build relationships with key people, get us access to other people, and then the pursuit advisor would help internally, mainly our internal team, kind of navigate through what they needed to be able to demonstrate and prepare for the next meeting, but what was also customer facing. Yeah, it's
very nice. I like it.
It's I think that's what I just feel like a lot of companies selling into enterprise aren't resourced as well as they need to be, and they're almost just winging it. And that's fine, but it's only going to get you so far. And I think, when you make a real investment in enterprise, you've got to make sure you've got the right people in place and the right smarts, because it's going to make a huge difference. And this is almost, and I had this conversation with somebody a week or two ago. They weren't doing anything wrong. They were successful. They're pacing towards quota, but they're missing some gaps. And it's almost like, if we're not doing anything wrong and things are going all right, then we're not really kind of analyzing too much. We're not really getting into the weeds to kind of optimize things very well. We're just doing what we're doing. But, it makes such a difference if you get it right. If you get it spot on, it's going to make a huge difference. And it's almost the difference between doing all right and, closing out these, closing a $5 million deal or closing a $20 million deal. Because if you've got the right people in those deals, you're going to 2-3x the value that you're going to get out of your customers.
Totally.
But and I think it's hard when you are a smaller organization to resource effectively, and you put a lot of reliance on the AE to do a lot of this work.
It's a team selling game, and you need to bring in a whale, you need a whole village of paddlers and kayaks.
Yeah, you do. Or at least to support the AE, you need 1 or 2 people around them to really get into the weeds in that deal with them. And I just see, where I see enterprise not working well, it's where the company are relying too much on the AE to do the heavy lifting, and they can only do so much on their own.
Yeah, totally. And extending beyond, like I forget who it was talking about the board. I think a board is a role that is either misunderstood or underutilized. I've been at companies where board members are 20 years out of the business, and they've got a nice name, but they're just not in the game anymore, and they're really of very little use.
Yeah.
While there was always a few, 2 or 3, who were super connected, super active, and open doors all day long. That's a board I can work with all day long.
Yeah.
And connecting the board with the sellers in a controlled way is the best way that I can think of putting together a system, a repeatable system of getting high-end accounts over and over.
Yeah. Yeah. One question that as a CRO, I think it's natural, but I think AE should also ask it. If you're selling enterprise into an organization, and you want to earn that million, you want to be selling $5 to $10 million dollars worth of ARR each year. If you're going for a job, ask how accessible the board are. How reactive are they? How responsive are they? How open are they to me reaching out? And how open are you to helping me get access to the board? These are really important questions for enterprise sellers to ask. Because that's going to give you a really good indication as to how much support you've got across that organization at the very top level to help you succeed in your job. Because the access to the board is really important. We're pushing on. I'm conscious we want to add at least some time for some questions. One thing I really think we should cover as well, because it's very pertinent, is the build versus buy, and the kind of defending the deal size that comes up in most of these conversations. So, when you're talking to an organization, it doesn't matter if they've got 10 billion or 100 billion revenue, right? If you're talking to them about a 5 million ARR contract over 3 years, 15 million plus, it's probably going to cost a couple of million to implement. You might add another 400K on recurring services across the course. So you're talking 20 million investment over the course of the next 3 or 4 years. There's always going to be pushback and resistance on the price, and it's going to force the buyers to start to think about, well, what happens if we build this? How long is it going to take us? What are we going to miss out on while we spend time building it? Can we build what they've already got today? And so build that value case, right? But how are you approaching that? How do you defend the deal size? Do you have a formula? Do you have something you've seen repeatedly work well to defend the deal size?
What I learned about defending deal size I learned from my VP of sales that I wrote about in the book that I wrote, Mega Deal Secrets, which is the story of my first big deal. And I remember him always, his name is Ivan, and he would always say, you can always argue what you can prove. And I choose to prove with numbers. And he was a data guy. He was the kind of guy, he had a motorcycle and he had multiple homes in France and other countries. And he would call me at like 1 a.m. on a motorcycle between his home in Nice and Paris. And he's like, Jamal, you know that cell, it was G95, because we were working on a pricing deal or something like that. I say, yeah. And I'd wake up and I'd go there and he's like, it shouldn't be 1.5 million. It should be 2.8 because we missed. He was just like this kind of savant kind of guy. But what he would do is he would task us. So one of the deals that we worked on was a customer that it was an existing customer. And not only did we sell them our software, but they hired our people to use our software on their behalf to create outcomes. And so we had so much data about the customer. He would say, go get the data about this and this and that, and then put it in this format and give it to me. And he would look at the data looking for arguments that made sense about why the price needed to go up or additional services that would be needed to create an even better outcome. And we did this over and over and over. And it was like 2 or 3 times out of 10, he would like, okay, that's a winning argument. That one we can use. And then he'd put it in his pocket until we had 4 or 5 great arguments. And so this is a bit of a long story, but defending the deal comes down to proving value. And that's why I keep in this conversation, I keep coming back to value engineering, because if you can do a collaborative value engineering process with the customer where they provide data and they provide and agree on assumptions that are used in the calculations that come to the value, the value outputs, that's really hard to defend against if you're the procurement team. Because when they say, yep, no, we ran these numbers, these are the assumptions, this is how much fully loaded employees cost, this is how long it takes to do the process, this is how much resource that we need to get the manufactured piece out of the factory. You're well prepared and you got great ammo to defend a price when you got that kind of data.
Yeah, very, very, very insightful, Jamal. Again, it's an important one. Lots of these topics we could dive into the weeds and spend hours talking about. I mean, they're just such complex questions and topics. It's really, really interesting. So let's open up to some questions. So if you have questions, use the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. We've already got a couple here. So let's start with that. Michael Underwood's written, do you have any insights you could share around when you should stop or no longer pursue a deal?
That is such a good question, because it's, how long is a piece of string? When is enough? I would say if you're looking for principles, so that's probably the best that I could do. The principle of when to cut bait and go home is when you do not have support from any champions, or when you don't have champions at a certain level, right? You've got to determine, here's how much I'm charging. Is this a worker bee deal, or is this a mid-level deal, or is this an executive deal, right? Based on how much it is. If it's 10K, I can get away with doing this with somebody low. If it's 100, I got to go meet it. If it's $1 million, I got to go high. And if you don't have a champion at that level after repeated attempts, the best you can do is downshift to the next level, maybe do a smaller deal. Yeah. The worst thing is just to push and push and push, and you just waste months when you could have got it to a no much faster.
Yeah. I was just trying to flip through my LinkedIn. I wrote a post on this a while back. Because it's a really important question, Michael. And I think that when you do any close loss analysis, and I would challenge any close loss analysis, most of the time you'll link it back to not having access to the right stakeholders and the exec sponsors. And if you take the time that you've spent in those deals that you don't win, think about what you could do with that time if you redeployed it back into deals you thought you could. It'll be a game changer. And so I think AEs don't value their time enough, and they do stay in these deals way too long. For me, I built a framework, and I can't remember what it was entirely. But it was almost, think about your ideal deal. Go back over the last few years, but maybe even now, go back the last 18 months, because maybe even what you were doing 3 years ago isn't relevant now. Think about how long each deal stayed in each stage of your pipeline. How many stakeholders you had in your deal? When did they arrive in that deal? How often did they engage with you? These are on your best deals that you closed and you won, right? Think about the level of communication you have. Did you have a champion? Did you have a coach? How many exec sponsors did you have? Build this out as your framework and the kind of KPIs that you want to see in order to stay in this deal. And so we did things like, if we didn't have a response back from either our exec or our champion within 3 emails, we sent 3 emails and didn't get a response back, we'd pull away. And if we couldn't get the exec sponsor to commit to at least a check-in every 4 weeks, then we probably wouldn't pursue it. We were pretty ruthless with how we did this, because we were finding we were spending so much time in these deals. And the trouble with enterprise is they're long, drawn out processes anyway, right? It's going to take you 18 months, 2 years, 3 years to close one of these deals. When they do, it's going to be a life changer for everyone. But you're already in the mindset of it's going to take a long time, so I'm happy to stay in this over the long term. But the danger is you're staying in over the long term for the wrong reasons. And so map out what you really need to see. And if you're not seeing it, then I would say step away. I wouldn't say close it down, because I think that's also wrong. But just step away. And if you're not getting the level of engagement that you need to see, that will show you intent, good intent, and some urgency in getting this done, back away. And I think that's going to be different for everyone. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule to it. I think you've just got to look at your deals and typically what you see when you close a really big deal, and map your other deals out to that. That would be my advice.
I'm seeing a question that is marked as answered, but we didn't get to it. It's from Claudio. He says, some tip to find and build a powerful relation with a champion in our 100% online meetings era, which is a great question. Claudio, the thing that comes to me is connection. So in the best case scenario, you're going to be able to get on a plane, go see this person and spend, time eyeball to eyeball. That's just as good as it can get in terms of a scenario. But in lieu of that, finding some connection with the person. You don't want to kind of in an almost disingenuous way start asking about their kids, right? And right in the middle of a business conversation. But you can tell that when you find a connection with somebody, the conversation can just move in a way that could be more personal, or observations of the world, or other things like that. Where you find a connection, those two things kind of go together. I had a call with a guy today. It was an initial call, and it was about the potential of doing an acquisition. And the first 20 minutes of the call was just talking. We both knew what was going on, and but the first 20 minutes of the call was just about kind of life in general and weather and other things. But although it was small talk, we were just kind of getting to know each other. I don't know. I don't need to talk about this forever, but business and interesting things about our person can absolutely mix. And in lieu of going to meet them in person and taking them out and, having all those, social experiences on top of work, finding a connection and meaning in the working relationship is probably the best thing. I don't know if you could call that a tip or a strategy, but it's more of a principle.
Yeah. There's a question here. I've lost it.
You should always be adding to your value proposition to get buy-in at the highest level.
So Priyesh has asked a question. For early stage startups, do you recommend selling to enterprise or just go for SMB? I'll start with that one. I mean, that's a matter of choice, Priyesh. I think that I know very good companies that start out selling just into enterprise, and I think there's a lot of merit in doing that. I think it's actually much harder to build a very big SMB business and move through to enterprise. If you have aspirations of being an enterprise company, then start at enterprise. Build your company around that, because I think even just what we've spoken about briefly here, you need the right people in place, and you need to be very intentional about who you hire to help you sell it into enterprise. You can also build a great business selling into SMBs. I mean, some of the biggest software companies in the world, Dropbox, for example, started selling SMB, it's a personal choice. I actually don't think it matters, but what is absolutely key is that whichever you decide to do, you need to make sure that you're building the right team, getting the right set of skills in place to help you do it. And one last thing, I think if you are launching an SMB strategy, go to market, and your vision is to move to enterprise, you need to think really carefully from the get-go about how that enterprise business starts to shape out for you and what that motion looks like. Don't leave that until you're ready to move into enterprise, because you'll make a lot of mistakes and it will cost you a lot of money. Anything to reflect on?
Yeah, I agree with everything, and I don't have much to add. Other than, you kind of said it. Totally depends on the problem you solve, because there are companies that are brand new startups that are going to have a hell of a time selling to enterprise because they have no brand and they're always going to have the viability issue. But the problem that they solve is experienced at the enterprise level, and it's not so much experience at the SMB level. Yeah. So then that SMB, enterprise is the right one. You're just going to have a tougher time starting from zero to get to enterprise.
Yeah. Well, Jamal, let's wrap this up. What are the 5, as a takeaway for everybody? What are the 5 must-haves for every seller selling into enterprise, both in terms of what they should be doing, what they need? 5 things. If you had to name 5 things that every seller must have or must be doing to be a really successful kind of big game seller in the enterprise, what are they?
Yeah, the 5 things. So 1, get comfortable being uncomfortable, connecting with and engaging with executives. That's 5 things right there. But if it was anything, that would be it. Yeah. Number 2, learn how to tell a value story that's based on the specific customer rather than what we're actually trained to do, which is to take the deck from sales enablement or marketing or product certification and use that as our talk track with the customer. Don't take this the wrong way, and I'm being extreme. Just throw that stuff out for the purposes of speaking with enterprise customers, because you really want to say, look, here's what we've learned about you, and here's some stats, or here's what your CEO has said, and here's how we get into the swim lane of either helping or supporting you do that. So that'd be the second thing, is learn how to tell a customer specific value story. Number 3, learn how to team sell. Adam already talked about this, but we got to move away from Batman and Robin selling. Batman is the seller and Robin is the pre-sales person. You can do 50K deals all day long like that, but you'll never do $1 million deal with that configuration. You're going to need a bigger deal team to get that done. Learn how to sell as team selling. That'd be 3. 4, multi-threading. You need relationship redundancy in every deal. And so if you've got this one person who loves your stuff and you talk to her instead of anybody else, you're going to be dead in the water. If she gets hit by a truck, leaves, promoted, demoted, you're out. What's a good last one, Adam?
I would say, personally, I would say learn how to defend against a build or buy, because you're going to come up against it all the time. And you know, that it all links back to the value story, and showing them, you know, the value of what almost the fear of what they're going to miss out on, and the opportunity cost of building this and taking 18 months to do it, and still not being where we are today in terms of a solution. But you really have to think, in my opinion, that you have to overcome that in almost every big deal, because most companies are going to be, even if they're not explicitly telling you they're doing it, they will be also thinking about, can they build this? And that typically leads to no decision.
Yeah.
So
and then they don't build it either. They don't buy it from you, and they don't build it.
Right, exactly. But that doesn't help you, right? And so if you want to get these deals over the line, you know, figuring out and mastering how you can get them comfortable that they should buy. Now, it might go against you because they might then decide to buy from somebody else. But it's a better situation because I think it's a better risk to take than them deciding to do absolutely nothing because they can't decide whether they should build or buy. But awesome, Jamal. This has been awesome. I've really enjoyed it, and thanks so much for your questions, everyone. And hopefully this has been insightful and useful. Reach out to Jamal, reach out to myself, with questions after this. We're always around and happy to help. Check out Jamal's community, Enterprise Sellers. It's awesome. And if you are an enterprise seller and you're not in it, you should be. And if you're interested in building a mutual process with your buyers, check out DealPad.io. Thanks, everyone, and really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, all.
Appreciate it. Take care, man.